and not just black men. We're talking about women who have died at police hands, and we're talking now transgenders that are being killed. And it's not the first now, and it's been happening for decades before. And unless we as a community, unless we as writers and poets keep on putting these names forward to say this is not right, and there is a humanity behind the individual, and when we stir hate and we get caught up in this volume of hate and destroy others, we're destroying humanity. We're not just getting rid of somebody we don't like. We're destroying our individual self in the process. And so as writers, we have to bear witness. And it's always been the core element of my writing. It's about bearing witness to the humanity of others. And that, hopefully, it will make a difference.
Welcome to another episode of Poetry to Your Ears. Today we're talking with Roy McFarlane.
Hello.
Hi there. Hi.
Roy is a poet, playwright, and former youth and community worker, born in Birmingham of Jamaican parentage, spending most of his years living in Wolverhampton and the Black Country, now residing in Brighton. Roy is Canal laureate for Brighton. For Britain. And Birmingham. And Midlands Institute Poet in Residence, as well as being the former Birmingham Poet Laureate. From Amsterdam to Philadelphia, Roy has shared his passion for social justice, equality, identity, love, and the healing power of poetry. His debut collection, Beginning with Your Last Breath, was followed by The Healing Next Time, both published by Nine Arches Press, which was shortlisted for the 2018 Ted Hughes Award and longlisted for the Jalak Prize.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Roy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We've actually wanted you on the podcast
for a long time.
Yeah, for maybe over a year at this point.
I think we keep passing each other at festivals. I think the first time I saw you was at the Verve.
Yeah.
We saw you at Words by the Water before, but we hadn't talked because you were on stage and we were in the background. And then, we saw you at Verve Poetry Festival and then Brighton. In Birmingham, and then Brighton Book Festival. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, as we do, we kind of accost you and say, "Oh, hi, Roy," because we know you're on stage and you're like, "Oh, well,
It's the micro celebrity, isn't it?
But I think it's good that it's actually taken this long to get to this conversation, because it's given time to read your book and engage with your text and hear you a couple more times and live, and given me a much greater appreciation of your work, because my first impression of you as a poet was Seagulls. Right, and it's a humorous piece, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you know it off by heart.
I don't, unfortunately.
but it's essentially a poem about how annoying seagulls are in Brighton. You having recently at the time moved to Brighton, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about?
Oh, the seagull pose. So the first thing I noticed, I think I had arrived into Brighton, we looked at the place, it was beautiful. We went down to the beach and then we went back and went to sleep. And then 5 o'clock in the morning, squawking of seagulls. It was just unbelievable. And then, whilst there are literally seagulls everywhere. And I just remember the one time my partner and I, we were walking, and my son, we were all walking along the pier, and she had a donut, and a seagull swooped down and grabbed the donut out of my partner's hand and mouth kind of thing. And it was just like, wow, these seagulls are damn.
They're ruthless.
And so
it's their town.
Yeah. And so the poem kind of looks at a seagull tap dancing on a Quaker's front yard, seagulls shaking Kentucky boxes and pizzas, and literally everything I think I've written in there is something that I've seen. literally, the seagulls. And the other thing I often say is that I've seen seagulls before, especially when you go around the canals of Birmingham and Tipton, but the seagulls are nothing. They're little. The seagulls of Brighton are gangsters. I call them the Tony Sopranos of the seagull world. Yeah,
underworld. Yeah. And so, this was my first impression of you as a poet, right? It's a humorist poet. And so when it comes to like this collection here, Living by Troubled Waters, and when we've seen you perform in the Brighton Book Festival, which we're going to talk about later, the content and tone of these poems are... There's not much humor to be found. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, this. Funny enough, I always have one or two humorous poems because you're aware of the audience that you're in, and you can't hit them with the solid stuff straight away, kind of thing. So of course you've got to create a relationship with the audience, and especially. If I'm in audiences away from Birmingham. Birmingham know me inside out. So, I could go to the Verve, I could go to Wolverhampton, I could go to any site around Black countries, and they know my work. And so they're ready and aware of what Roy is going to bring to the table. But I'm sensitive that if I'm new to Brighton or I find myself up north or somewhere like that, this is a different audience, and so you have to start with a conversation and something that make people feel comfortable, and then you introduce them to the real Roy McFarlane.
Yeah, and it just speaks to your range for how you can go, make a whole collection that does have the courage to, just be serious, essentially. Do you envision putting collections together that are humorous, or will it always be a mix? Would you say?
I don't think I do humour, so it's quite intriguing when people say the seagull poems and things like that.
So you wrote it in pure anger, and you kind of interpreted it live in a humorous way.
No, I don't imagine myself to be humorous, but it's quite interesting that. Yeah, I mean, if you look through my collections, I know people say, like Saturday Soup from my first collection, Beginning with Your Last Breath, has a bit of humour in there and stuff like that. Or it's quite interesting when I talk about Patterson's House from my first collection. And you just mentioned something about coming from Smethwick, and everybody laughs. I don't know why people laugh at the idea of this guy coming from Smethwick. I try to mix it up. I think, as you say, I'm known for the serious stuff with love, because I will always finish a set with love. So whether it's something that reflects about my love for my father, my mother, or sensual love, there are many times I've talked about love in a very sensual, desirous way, kind of thing. It's always my intention to finish the set, that everybody leaves on a high as we walk away.
And of course, you were poet laureate for Birmingham. So how did that come about? Did you feel such a great,
responsibility?
Exactly. Yeah, I went blank there.
Like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's an honor kind of thing. So you're on a journey as a poet, and you're doing a lot of performance poets, and you're doing all these little gigs that may have about 10 people that turn up, kind of thing, and you're doing your trade, as it were. And then to get an opportunity where you apply, you send a couple of your poems, you go for an interview, you get shortlisted to about 5 people, you come back and you do a bit more interviews, and then suddenly somebody says, "We like you, we want you to be the Birmingham Poet Laureate." It's like, wow, your life changes. And Birmingham really put a lot of energy, celebration. I was on BBC News, the local Birmingham BBC News. On the day it's done, it's usually on National Poetry Day. So you literally get taken around Birmingham, whether it's to different events or, you're being interviewed by the papers, being interviewed by BBC, you're being taken to an event here and there, and then on the night you get an award, you get a trophy, and then you perform, and it's just, they make a whole song and dance of it.
We just want to take a moment to talk to you about Fawn Press, an indie press that publishes poetry that takes you by the hand and leads you into the woods. You can get 10% off all books on their website, www.fawnpress.co.uk, with the code POETRY10, as small letters, POETRY10.
Toussaint. In the island of Saint Domingo, Toussaint's republic, where Negroes are found, children rise. Bonaparte will go to the English without delay, before peace, before independence. Toussaint's new Negroes, runaway Negroes, be free on Saint Domingo.
Yeah. So what made you want to start with that?
Well, again, core element of the collection, Living by Troubled Waters, was the idea that issues around racism and inequalities have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I was just thinking of the Haiti revolution back in 1807, and just the power of this one man. Well, not just Toussaint. There were many, many revolutionary guys, but Toussaint was amazing. And I was just looking at how I had adapted a newspaper clipping from the 1800s, and all the fear of if things kick off in Saint Domingo, what's going to happen to the rest of Europe, and all the other islands that have been colonized. And I just wanted to play with the text and the writing, and then I found these hidden words in the writing, and it was this beautiful echo about freedom, about running away, and the idea of new Negroes, new life, new independence. And I just can feel Bonaparte in the background going, "Arr!" So all of that was in there, and I just wanted to, I just think that's a part of the essence and the spirit of the collection.
Yeah. So the background for people listening, if they don't know who Toussaint is he was a slave uprising leader.
Yeah.
There's great books about him as well, like Black Jacobins.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. Very educated fella.
I was trying to think who wrote Black Jacobins.
C.L.R.
James.
C.L.R.
James. Yeah, that's the one. Get that book, please. Really good.
And the poem, I think it's worth mentioning, it's an erasure poem. So it means you took a text from a newspaper and you blacked out most of the text and just left some of the words. Do you want to walk us through this process and what it means to you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the individual who I got the inspiration from to do, and he's just passed away, if I remember correctly. So it's called erasure poems, or an erasure technique kind of thing. And the idea, forgive me, I can't remember who the guy was. The idea is that you get, it could be a document, it could be a paper clip, a newspaper report or something like that. And you just find within that limited text of 50 words or 200 words, you find a poem in there, or you find something that comes out, lifts itself out of that jumble of text. And in doing that, you erase all the rest. There are techniques of scribbling it out, or in one technique that I do, I paint over it. Some people will lift the words that they find out of the text and put it on another page, kind of thing. So there are different techniques to the erasure poem. But yeah, it's a great have a go at it. It's really a great task or joy to just sit there, and I think that's probably the important part, because you get absorbed into that writing, and it may be a writing from another period, but while you absorb yourself in that text is saying one particular thing from one particular perspective. So it's written by a white man to declare the dangers of what is happening in Haiti and the islands, kind of thing. But from me as a black person looking in there, I can see beauty, I can see revolution, I can see this amazing other thing coming out of there. And it's what you see in there that you bring out of the poem, out of the text.
It's to say that the text is not one objective thing. There's many ways of looking at it.
That's right, yeah.
And you've done a beautiful job in colorizing it as well.
Yeah.
Is this your colorizing?
That's my coloring, yeah.
Coloring in. Fancy word.
That was my first attempt at water painting. So that's me. And I just wanted to try something different. It's me being different. So that one kind of, again, is a sort of... one particular erasure poem might be looking at running away and by the rivers, kind of thing. And so I would paint that in blue and green fields, kind of thing. I think when I do the Toussaint text, I think that has an image of Toussaint, an old image of Toussaint, put upon the text, as well as the colour of the Haiti's flag, if I remember correctly. So there are different things that I did to add to the poem that was there, and I hope people might get the gist of that. There's another poem, I think where it's red and yellow, and that's about fire. I can't remember what the context was, but I was trying to show something burning and fire.
It adds like a subconscious communication with the colors.
That's right. That's right.
It's it's kind of reclaiming, like you mentioned, you kind of editing old slave texts or slavers' texts or letters and things they put out, proclamations and things like this. Yeah. And it's kind of reclaiming that as well, isn't it? It's kind of taking power back from this text that is so evidently
painful and
terrorizing
and traumatic. Yes, absolutely. I think the one you're talking about, the To Be Free. Yes, and it's quite interesting that when we look at the trauma of the writing, that I try to bring out the humanity out of the writing. For example, with To Be Free, I found these paper clippings that you would find in what I would call today the Daily Mirror or the Times, and they're on the front page or on the inside cover. You would have something like reward of £20 to any person who can prove her being harboured by any white or free person, or something like absconded from the subscriber on the 8th of July 1814, two Barbadian men, brothers by name Pompey and Antony, a black man, the latter a tawny skin, and the former pretty, or something like that, right? And all of these things are there, and finally say we'll give you $20 or £20 if you catch them, and it's just so inhumane. And this was something that would be there on the morning around the table, where 2 or 3 generations
totally normalized,
normalized. And I just wanted to get that text and bring back the humanity, the soul of the individuals, and celebrate and almost celebrate. Yes, Pompey and Antony, you got away, and I'm praying you're still running. Yeah.
I think a meaning I really like as well about the erasure poem, it is about acknowledging history and ancestors. And I was reading Still Like an Artist just before that interview, and it was saying, everything has been done already. It's just about putting it to new people because people aren't listening. And this is about what is there more to say than everything that happened in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so, and I think that's the power of the artist. I think we should always remember that we're part of this cycle of stories. We're part of a tradition of stories, whether we are painters, musicians, or storytellers and poets. It's this incredible gift that we are given to tell the humanities and the stories, to bear witness to things that have gone on, to hopefully kind of trouble the minds of those in power or the collective that is around us, that, you know, we can be different. We can be good to others. We can learn from the mistakes of the past and be better. Unfortunately, something about humanity, that when we make a step forward to be better, we often make 2 steps back and go back to our old ways, kind of thing. And as poets, as artists, we can't give up. No matter how many times we've seen these stories, no matter how many times we've seen George Floyd, Stephen Lawrence, Emmett Till, it's like every 20 years we have these persons. And not just black men. We're talking about women who have died at police hands, and we're talking now transgenders that are being killed. And it's not the first now, and it's been happening for decades before. And unless we as a community, unless we as writers and poets keep on putting these names forward to say this is not right, and there is a humanity behind the individual, and when we stir hate, and we get caught up in this volume of hate and destroy others, we're destroying humanity. We're not just getting rid of somebody we don't like. We're destroying our individual self in the process. And so as writers, we have to bear witness. And it's always been the core element of my writing. It's about bearing witness to the humanity of others. And that hopefully it will make a difference.
Yeah. The other poem there that was really amazing, that really thought was phenomenal, was the "Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's cager?" Which is
brilliant.
And that is innovative use of placement of words as well. And what was where did you find that article? Did you find that in the British Library?
Yeah. It's the same again. It's
Cain rose against Abel.
Yes,
called.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just show just so they get an idea of the form?
No problem. And I really appreciate that. I mean,
this something about the layout of this and the way you engage with that text that, to me, really kind of plugged me in, connected me into a really deep empathy for the, like you say, the humanity that is like lacking in that text, the humanity that's lacking in just the kind of the presumption of we're just going to put that out there like it's normal. We're going to put it out there like it's business as usual. You know?
Business as usual, and that's the scary part about it. And again, even I was shocked. No, I'm a guy that's been around doing anti-racism work before I became a poet. So from the 90s, I've been in the struggle. I've been on the road. I've been doing so many things. I would say 2010, 2003 is when I really kind of started off being a poet with like a group called the New October Poets, and we did performances. I would say about 2010, 12, I became Birmingham Poet Laureate. And that was really an incredible springboard. And 2016 was my first collection. But coming to sit down and research this, and to see again an advertisement in I think it was the Barbadian Times or something like that, where it says Negroes confined in the cage. and you'd have the date, Bridgetown, January the 13th, 1818. And you would go through paper after paper. Same again, Negroes confined in the cage, Bridgetown, February the 21st, 1818, and so on and so on. And I guess what I started to see when I started to look through, I started to see there were names. Certain names were still there. And I'm thinking, are these individuals still in the cage? Sorry, I'm to tell you the story. So the ideas of the Negroes confined in the cage is that if a slave ran away, they would put them into a confined area, and I imagine it's a cage. I'm sure it's out there in the public, and it was almost saying, owners of this slave, will you come and pick up your slave who ran away?
Yeah. It's like a kennel kind of thing, like it's for missing dogs or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And I was, you do not know the tears to believe that this is how a human being was being handled. And then as I looked through it, I would see, like I say, January the 13th, 1818, Ned Robbins, owner, Mr. Gibbs. And then, in February, Ned Robbins still there. But Mr. John Gibbons is deceased, kind of thing. And it just made me think of these people that are still in there, and people are asking about the owners to come along. And I think there was one particular guy, he was there from January to sort of like May 18. And it just made me think about the whole Cain and Abel story, about, in reality, we are all brothers and sisters. And yet we can sink so low to look at our brothers, and because of the color of the skin, because of their religion, because of their sexuality, because of their bodily ability, we look down on them, or we'll go to the extent of demonizing them and destroying someone who is our brother, who is our sister. And so it just made me think of the Cain and Abel story. And so you will have, like you said, there are 3 pages, and if you look, which I'm just so blessed that you looked at it, so, because not many people have talked about this, but you've looked at it so profoundly and seen what was going on. And so what I do is I cut the clipping out of the newspaper. This is
interesting how you put it together technically. Yeah.
We had to reprint it, etc. I couldn't cut the paper, right? So I got the paper. When I saw names that I thought were being repeated and I wanted to tell their stories, I cut the paper, that ad up, and in between the ad, I started to put a little story. So, like the first one, Cain rose against Abel. In between the names that are being shown, to border on our humanity, these caviar, hollow places of morality. And then I go on to say, am I my brother's keeper, or am I the cage keeper? And it's important that I ended that, because what you will always see at the end of the ad is the guy who is holding the slaves. And in this particular case, you had somebody called J. Sidney, the cage keeper, and he signed it. He was the cage keeper. And it just got me thinking. And so I bring Dante's Seventh Circle in there and continue to talk about Abel's blood. I think the last thing I did, and to the sprinkle the blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel, the blood of the enslaved. It's again, I appreciate you. We're having a conversation about that, because I think that series, those 3 poems, was written over a month, because I must have gone through about 100 of those advertisements.
We're used to thinking of slavery as being historical, but reading that, for me, puts me right in the middle of it. It puts me right back there. It's immersive, that format. And Eloise was saying yesterday, she said, this would be a great book to teach in schools, like poetry in schools.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's a few kind of words in there you might want to edit, but
I hear that.
For the most part, though, I'm in complete agreement with you. Like, I think that's a wonderful way to engage with that period of history. And you've got testimonies on the front of the book that say, it doesn't, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but it says it doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't cater to white fragility and this kind of thing. And, Eloise, you enlightened me a little bit about this concept of white fragility, right?
Yeah, I was saying how you're not trying to accommodate the truth to not make people uncomfortable. Right. How you just in the middle of everything and you show the pain and the trauma, and also, like as a white person, the guilt that my ancestors have, like they're guilty, and that's an uncomfortable truth. But you need to sit there, and that's our history, that's how we got here. And I feel like it's through doing it through poetry and these paper clips and that, it's just such a different way of showing history, showing that social history, and in these individuals, in the personal. And it just touches you in a way that maybe history lessons don't, if that makes sense. So it can be, taught in like the technique of poetry, but also just learning about our society.
Yeah. Listen, when I look at the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, and the most horrible thing that has happened in the last century, and we are aware of that, and we try our best to, whether it's the museums, whether it's the Holocaust Day, whether when you look at what Germany did, and you have deniers. This is the thing when you have a backlash of individuals who don't want to lose their status quo, if that's the right scenario of being at the top, and it's being challenged, your position. So let us demystify, let's lie, let's say that it didn't exist. But for the main thing, when you look back at UNESCO, in, if I'm not mistaken, 1951, and the creation of the human rights kind of thing, this came out of this place where we were scarred, that we've gone to 2 world wars, and especially the Second World War, where 6.5 million or however million Jews were slaughtered, murdered. And so rightly so, that Germany did a program over the next 30, 40 years that it should be taught so we don't make this mistake again. Rightly so, that the UNESCO would go around creating the human rights. Now that our government today is tearing apart when it comes to migration and shit like that, right? Rightly so, that we should have a Holocaust Day. So tell me, if that is profound to that terror, that horror, why are we not doing the same to a black Holocaust that continues to affect so many people over so many generations, across so many lands, across Europe, across America, across what you call the global north, and the global south is still being affected by the ramifications of a black Holocaust. And yet, we're not talking about it. For me, I'm not too profoundly bothered about reparations. I just want you to have a conversation and say sorry, and that's it. Okay, let's move forward and what we may be able to do. But the fear of the economic backlash and so many other things is stifling the conversation that we should be having. And we will never, I believe categorically, we will never move forward enough or far enough until we have that conversation and we say, as you said, it is an uncomfortable truth. But if the next generation says, we fucked up, right? If the next generation say, we will not do this again, then we will move forward. But if we're constantly pushing it under the table, under the carpet, and we're saying, oh, it happened 200 years ago, we'll come back to George Floyd. George Floyd will happen again.
And
I guarantee you.
You show the ramifications in the present. A poem that really struck me is about medical racism.
Yes.
It's called, I think, Black Women Don't Feel Pain or something like that.
Yeah.
When I read that, honestly, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it was like a real thing that you found, that first reaction to it.
Well, a part of it is a conversation about my mom as well, because my mother had a major operation on her throat in the 60s, and to this, I mean, my mom's passed away in 2014, but there's a major slicing down the center of her throat that left her throat looking like a sliced. I can't remember what I said it looked. At the time, I had a vision of what it looked like. And she would always cover up, even in the summertime, she would always have these turtleneck, or if that's the right expression, jumpers that would cover the scar. It really profoundly had a knock on her. This beautiful woman, always in summertime, covering the scar on her throat. And the stories that she tells me about, I mean, to this day, I'm not 100% sure what the operation was for, but she believes that it was almost like rather than a simple operation, they literally butchered her throat, and the pain that she was left in is unbelievable. But oftentimes nurses would walk by and almost ignore her as if, you're exaggerating. Or I think there was one time somebody says, well, you black people can take pain, so et cetera, et cetera. And so, when you read this, and again, when you look into the newspaper, one particular guy made a fortune of experimenting. I think it was Dr. Thomas Hilton. And I've got in italics what I draw out of the text. Blister to my hands, legs and feet, which bear the scars to this day. He continued until he drew up the dark skin. John Brown, a slave lent to Dr. Thomas Hilton, to imagine and to formulate all manner of assumptions upon black bodies. I want to dig under the copious, thick, white skin of hate until you have to escape to a place free from pain. So I just wanted to put a series, take us from that period of time to this present time, about the idea of women, but black bodies. There's this kind of myth, and there are many myths about black bodies, but the myth about black women not feeling pain through pregnancy and things like that.
Yeah. Shall we go into a lighter tone and talk about the Brighton Book Festival?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was going to say that we're talking about a lot of the horrors of this collection, and the deep traumas and this kind of thing. But there's immense
so much
beauty and love and hope in this collection as well. The title poem here, "Living by Troubled Waters." It's a collection of, is it 4?
Yeah, there's 4. Yeah,
that run throughout the collection.
Yeah,
and these paint just wonderful, beautiful images here. And each one's a little bit Each one's a little bit different. Is it a narrative that goes from the start to the end through these collections, or are they more kind of disparate?
I would say they're disparate, but with a theme.
Both.
Both, definitely both. I think the idea was the idea of the waters, and whilst the waters is troubled, there's a place of sanctuary. So again, if I was to go through them, the one.
I like the third one about the water coming into kind of invading the house as spirits.
Mom. Okay, good.
It's wonderful.
It's number 2. Living by Troubled Waters. And again, with the feminine spirit and the feminine mind, I was looking at also I'm trying to think, where's the first one? I'm sure the first one's about I can't. Living by Troubled My Mother. Yeah, okay, so yeah. The first one, Living by Troubled Waters, number one, is about my mother, who... And just for the listeners, I'm adopted from the age of 6 months. And if you go to my first collection, Beginning with Your Last Breath, it's a beautiful collection. And you just can't read the third collection without reading the first collection. Well, you really can't read all the collections. Anyway, Beginning with Your Last Breath touches upon my life mother passing away with cancer, and also it touches on my birth mother and the first time I find out that I am adopted. And
what age were you?
I was 13 when I found out. My mum took me into the bedroom and says, "Listen," and showed me the documents.
It's a difficult age to process that.
I flipped. Well, I didn't flip at my mom. I just didn't want to know who my birth mother was. I was so angry. I just thinking, really, you're the only one I know, and this life that I live is perfect. I couldn't imagine another life. Well, I could not imagine another mother, because my life mother was just unbelievable. And so with that, in all my collections, Mom comes in, my life mother, and sometimes my birth mother. And so the first one, I wanted to start the journey again, Living by Troubled Waters. So the first one is about my mom, who grew up by a river in Jamaica. And the idea, she'd always tell me the stories of going down to get water. And then I just imagine, my father must have got attracted to her by waters. And I wanted to tell all this beautiful romantic story of the... And bringing the myth, there's a myth about waters where River Mumma is a Jamaican myth about this beautiful... goddess who sits on a stone and watches over you, and she has this long flowing hair that she combs. So River Mumma is a mythical thing there, and I bring all of that in the first one. So first one, you're in Jamaica and you watch the journey of my mum coming to England, and the second one, Living by Troubled Waters, and I'll read it to you. Our house was often visited by spirits. Waters often found their way into our home. My mother, of sound mind, saw things other people didn't see. Her whole body, a divining rod. She who moved gracefully in the spirit when it poured, danced in the pool, raised her arms spellbound to the sky as if she could touch and hold onto the source. We lived in a semi-detached house on a hill. Water trickled in, leaving trails and watermarks only my mother noticed and tried to ignore, smiling when she saw I was watching, as she whispered to the walls as they drooled. My mother, who mellowed by still waters, could not be at peace. And in this nursery, I learned of doppies and rolling calves, of climbing a flight of stairs on hands and knees, of a boxed room big enough to leave a memory in a corner, darkness embodied, moving into the light, stretching forth an arm, and a child flying down a flight of stairs, sitting on a magic carpet, shouting, "Badder, badder, badder," upstairs. We left the house on the top of the hill, always moving, until Mother found serenity in a home by still waters.
It's sublime. It's brilliant. It's like magical realism, you know? Yeah. It's kind of like Gabriel Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that, in that vein, where it paints just a colourful image in your mind. And
you really loved that book, didn't you?
I love that book too. We both love that book.
It really opened my mind to how great magical realism can be. As a genre, you know. Because before that, I'd be like, oh, you know, magic, I'm not that interested in. But it really goes to show that the strength of writing can really do wonders in that. But it's, and you know, I mean, I read this poem last night. And hearing you speak it and voice and it adds another dimension to it. Where
I'm sorry.
Do you have an audiobook?
I haven't got an audiobook with this one.
We were talking about that last time when we met at the Brighton Book Festival. I think you were encouraging Roy to record an audiobook.
Yeah, I feel like your voice adds a lot.
No, I appreciate that. And again, this I so appreciate this idea of a magical realism, and yet part of it is real to me. My mother was a staunch Pentecostal believer. My father was a deacon, and so that's what I knew for my first 40 years of my life. And in that, my mother believed in being filled with the Holy Ghost, being filled with the Spirit that comes from God. And she equally believed if there is a spirit from God, there must be a devil or demonic presence and things like that. And so it's quite interesting that growing up, at no time did I feel in danger, but I would always see my mom talking to the walls or talking to something or somebody, almost rebuking somebody in the house kind of thing. And I know that oftentimes that could be seen as mental health, on some spectrum of the mental health. And I just wanted to capture that because it's real to me. And again, I repeat, I never felt any danger about my mom. And it's just intriguing. Again, is this part of the trauma that we inherit and have to find a way to survive while we are living by troubled waters? And so for my mom, it was being in the church, believing in God. And so whatever racism, whatever the struggles financially, whatever she may never attain, because she could read music off a sheet. And I could imagine my mom could be a composer or something in another universe, or a teacher because of what she taught me kind of thing. But otherwise, she just became a mom at home, looked and loved my father and me, and gave everything that she could for us. But I just wonder, in another universe, in another world, what my mother could have been. And this is her way of surviving in those troubled times.
You think you kind of create the image of, or the point of view of yourself as a boy as well? You know, it's kind of like, it's got a childish kind of...
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when you're a child, you don't understand so much about the world. You take it for granted as an adult, all the things you understand about how things work. But as a child, you just kind of, you do go on these kind of elemental ways of understanding. Yeah,
without a doubt. I mean, the last part... the child running down the stairs, or the child walking up, seeing something in the room, and then coming down the stairs going bada, bada, bada. The amount of times I heard people telling me that story when I was growing up, it was all, you know, when the church brothers would come around and they'd sit down. I remember the time you was running down the stairs. You say you see something, then you're going bada, bada, bada. So
it's how you remembered.
So it's intriguing, some of these stories, you know what I mean? Truthful, mythical, what we imagine, what we project, I don't know.
So you want to tell us about the Brighton Book Festival? Transition us into the Brighton Book Festival.
All right, yeah. So you were the poet in residence at the Brighton Book Festival, which is organised between Afrori Books and the Feminist Bookshop in Brighton. And is it the second year running, I think, of the festival?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
It was at the Contemporary Centre of Arts, and it was throughout a week.
Yeah.
A small week, a short week, yeah. Do you want to tell us more about what you did at the festival as the poet in residence?
Well, I mean, the idea was to get involved. They just gave me a freedom to do anything I wanted. But I guess the key thing, they looked at 4 programs. So there's one, a celebration of Windrush, which, for those who might not know what Windrush is in 1948, a boat called the Windrush HM, I can't remember. Windrush landed in Tilbury Dock and had over 490 Caribbean and other individuals on the boat, who were the first sort of like migrationary group to be asked to come over to England to help rebuild England. And so there's been this nice kind of conversation about, over the next decade or two, of a Windrush generation that I would say that I'm a child of Windrush. And so it's 75 years from 1948, and we did an amazing celebration, brought in other novelists and storytellers, and we talked about the effect and what it is for Britain as well as us as individuals. The next day was I did a poetry workshop, and we did a thing called the Poetry Cafe, and we had amazing poets came in, and then I finished the night, and I know this is the thing that really excited you, finished the night with a collaboration with Randolph Matthews, who is a musician and an incredible jazz musician, gospel R&B. He has his loop machine and all his incredible, magical, musical thing that he has on this one machine, and his voice can be anything from an angel to a bass guitar to a trumpet to whatever. And
they haven't come up with the word to describe what he does. Yeah,
you can't describe
He's
it.
He's like the first. Yeah.
And we got together and we did a set. It was about a 30-minute set. We brought Living by Troubled Waters to life. And yeah, I'm thinking about it, I've got goosebumps because...
And there's such a lyricality as well in your own words. So it was a beautiful
it was a
symphony.
Did you... It sounds like you were surprised how well it went. Did you expect...
You as an individual... know there's something magical. And I think that when we started to have that conversation, the journey started last October. We were at a thing called the Apples and Snake celebration of 40 years. I was invited to read a few poems. Randolph was invited to just do his thing on his own in between the poets. And then I said, Randolph, any chance? Because I've seen Randolph in action. Any chance you could do something with this particular poem? And I think we did... Meet Me by the River, old gospel tune. And so right there and then, off the cuff, we did Meet Me by the River, and it was just amazing. And then people say, you two need to do something. And so we've been trying to do something, and it's about finance, getting each other together. And so we managed Brighton Book Festival and made it happen. And you asked the question, am I surprised? There's an expectation. But what I saw, the love, the tears, the whole room stood up, and again, tingles are going down my spine, remembering that evening. And so it has encouraged me that I guess I've got to put this together.
Are you going to play again together? Have you got something planned?
We're looking to put a tour together. So we're looking at funding, we're looking at ways that we can get it started, and we will do a tour. And get it out there. So
if you're watching this, when there's a tour on, we'll advertise everything.
Yeah, but it was just an amazing night. So again, you have to understand, like you said, that I know I've got this voice, from a gospel tradition, from a preaching tradition, and you just imagine Randolph with his sort of gospel and jazz riffing, and there was like a call and response, and we just brought church to the place, we brought a jazz club to the place.
He can sing. Put it mildly, folks. Yeah, such range. I mean, really, I'm kind of eager to maybe describe what he does a little bit more for the audience, because
I'll
it's so difficult to...
You describe it.
Wow. Let me have a go. Let me have an attempt at this. It's kind of something. It's kind of like a MC, one-man band, beatboxer, but without the beatboxing.
Yeah.
It's, like you say, gospel singing, just complete musicality, just immersed, and he becomes the music, right? You see physical manifestation of the music in him, and his voice, the way he's using his voice, like you say, he uses effects and reverb and this kind of thing that he controls in the moment at the time, and where he becomes the bass guitar, right? He becomes the bass. He becomes the bass tones.
That was incredible.
He's like music embodied in a human being.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to scratch the surface on, you can't explain with words music.
Has he got any recording available?
Yeah. I mean, please, if you can look up Randolph Matthews on his website, please just go look for him, look at the stuff that he's doing, and he's always somewhere. I mean, by coincidence, I was performing in Cheltenham on the Saturday night, somewhere in late May or something like that, and he was performing in the jazz festival on the Monday following, and I just didn't manage to get to see him. So Randolph Matthews, look him up. He's incredible, and I think when you look at a perfect collaboration, it's that one person doesn't swallow up the other.
Yeah,
and it's the way
you complement each other. Really well.
Yeah. It was just beautiful. Yeah.
And so we went to a couple of days of the Brighton Book Festival, and we went to the beautiful sunny day where we did it outside.
Colourful nature.
Colourful nature.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
And you said at the time, it's exactly what you hope and kind of have when you dream about a poetry event. You want to walk into a garden and it be sunny and doing poetry out on the lawn.
Have a picnic,
it was beautiful. I mean, I was blessed the day before when I did the poetry workshop. So we did the poetry workshop inside, and with half an hour to go, I had to get the attendants out of the hall that we were performing, because we had to do sound checks. So we had to get them. I thought, give them a break, and I thought, let's go in the park. In the park, in the
garden.
In the garden.
Oh, so you're taking credit for this?
Of course, I got it.
Yeah, well, it seems like they made the right person the poet in residence.
So we was out in the garden, and we workshopped in the garden, and I just encouraged, take your shoes off, walk in the grass, feel it while you're writing the poem that I asked them to write. And then the next day, we had colourful nature in the amazing week of poetry and writing.
Nice.
What are you up to in the next weeks, months?
Well, I am reaching the grand age of 60, so in August I am going to the Caribbean islands, kind of thing, just to chill for the next 2 or 3 weeks, kind of thing. So I'm just closing a few things between now and then, come back in September refreshed and on board with a few things. So I am the National Canal laureate. So I'm just hearing news yesterday that I'll be doing it for another year. So
congratulations.
We're looking at getting and part of my role as Canal laureate is just, especially for me, the way I looked at it, I wanted to interact with individuals that live by these canals, and oftentimes these canals, because they came about because of the Industrial Revolution, and it was part of being able to transport coal and iron.
So is that related to the Black Country then?
Absolutely, Black Country.
Where it's based?
Well, no, it's all. If you look at the core aspects, especially when they were building, you had from Manchester or Liverpool down to Birmingham, and then from Birmingham to London. But also you will have sort of like something like, I don't know, Manchester to Leeds, which was looking at the textile industry and how you would, get it to the port, but how you would get raw material to do it, etc., etc. And it's just an incredible story, especially in the making of the canals kind of thing. And so I wanted to draw some of that history, as well as the present day where there's been a lot of festivals, a lot of celebration about the canals. And so I've been performing on the canals or reading at canal events or doing workshops. So what I'm hoping by the end of next year, I might have a collection around some of that journey.
Can I just ask? So the Canal laureate is it more that it's kind of a romanticization of the canals, or is it more of a kind of like looking back, kind of reconciling history? What tends to be the kind of tone of?
Well, every laureate comes with their own journey. So when it was opened, when the idea started, which I think was about 6 or 8 years ago, you had somebody called Jo Bell, amazing poet, who was a boater. She has a boat. And so it was a whole style, a way of living. And so
it's like celebratory.
And so it celebrated the idea of living on canals kind of thing. And then following her, I think we had Luke Kennard. And for him, I imagine he was just walking around the canals around Birmingham. And then you had somebody like Nancy Campbell, if I remember correctly, who was kayaking. I don't know why I'm doing it like that. And so she came at it with her aspect. But for me, as a child that grew up in Tipton, Wolverhampton, these canals were in my backyard kind of thing. And what for me, when I know the grey urban setting, especially in Birmingham, and you got all these big buildings, to go into these beautiful veins of nature and beauty and stuff like that. And for me, like during lockdown, the canals were our outlets, especially in Tipton, where there's hardly any green area. You would walk along the canals, and the amount of people that you would see jogging and walking along the canals. And for me, you'll see my collection where I talk about a heron. And it was walking along the canal during the period of time George Floyd that I was struggling with writing, because again, this has happened. How many times have I written about it? And again, George Floyd. So for about a month, I couldn't write until I saw a heron, and that's the truth. I saw a heron, this most beautiful, graceful and bird, and we just looked. We had a conversation. She or he flew away, and then my collection started to come into being, kind of thing. To the heron who stood with me in the ruins of another black man's life, after Gwendolyn Brooks and Gil Scott Heron. To the heron long and lean, standing still on the corners where the waters bend. To the heron, gracefully grey, poised at the water's edge. To the heron, painted in the tapestry of reeds, waiting. I want to learn the art of waiting in these dreadful times, thick engulfing, choking times. To the heron, long-limbed, taking 1, 2 steps, stretching those wings, leaping like Michael Jordan, to rise in brilliance. To all herons from the lineage of Bennu, he who came into being by himself. To all the herons left school real cool. To the heron lurking late in summertime. To the heron with the slow wing beats of a double bass on a jazz June evening. To the heron motionless, still, standing still. To Gil Scott Heron, whilst I'm here standing in the ruins of another black man's life, I am death, cried the vulture, for the people of the light. Yet, here we stand on the muddy banks alive, longing, begging, needing change. To all those gliding towards the sunset, beautiful is your name. Thank you.
Roy McFarlane, ladies and gentlemen. A theme that runs in your poetry is kind of masculinity, the sensitivity and masculinity. Would you say, men having the ability to cry, not obviously that's related to mental health. There's more awareness about that than ever. I bring this up because you mentioned that on stage before, and sometimes I think you've been known to have a little tear in the eye on occasion. Can you speak a little bit about that? What that means to you?
Well, you have to take me there. Absolutely. No, I think that the most core element and important part of poetry is that we connect to the audience, or we connect to the reader, and I think that there has to be an essence of emotional content in our writing, and so if that emotional content doesn't work for you as the writer, as you're writing it down, or as you're reading it, how do you expect to connect or make it work for others, kind of thing? And so you have to bare yourself naked, but be self-caring, not self-destructive, or leaving yourself in so much pain after you've expressed or written something. So be careful in that journey. But what I like the idea is that if through our words we can heal ourselves and then heal others, then that's the gift and the blessing that we are fortunate to find ourselves in. And so, when I write from the heart. My first collection was about a difficult journey of watching my mom pass away. And a friend of mine says, write it. You're a writer, write what is happening, be in that place. And with that, it became a part of my first collection, kind of thing. So I write the tears, I write the sorrow, I write the loss, but I write the love. I equally write the anger, and as you know, all three collections has anger. But again, it's all encapsulated in love, because I don't want to wipe out anybody or whatever. I just want to say, look, this is what's happening. But if we come together, we can make a different world. Yeah.
Thank you, Roy, so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a real joy and such a treat to enjoy your work and
have this conversation. Yeah.
And
Reste deux femmes et un parapluie au coin de la rue. Papotage féminin de robe. La brume rit, secoue ses cheveux. De l'autre côté de la rue, l'homme les observe, de loin, de dos.
Thank you for listening to Poetry to Your Ears. This podcast is published as a newsletter on Substack. All of our content is published for free, but if you would like to support our work, you can become a paid subscriber. This will help us support transcripts for the deaf and hard of hearing community, and anyone who would benefit from reading the podcast alongside hearing it. You can also support us for free by rating the show on Spotify and Apple Podcast, or writing a review on Apple Podcast. Share the show with your friends, fellow poets, and poetry lovers. If you want to interact with us, you can follow us on @poetry2yourears on Instagram and @poetry2 on Twitter, or you can also write a comment on Substack. If you're American and you're listening to us, send us a message. Half of our listeners are American. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.